Hello, welcome to Culture of Christianity, where we're going to dive into a political issue and a moral issue that has been a really hot topic here in Virginia of late. The issue is abortion. This message is to encourage my fellow Republican, my fellow conservative constituents and legislators to think and speak differently about the abortion issue. I want to expose some of the inconsistency in our rhetoric in regards to this by a simple argument. The first point in the argument is this: if murderers should be punished, and two, if knowingly killing a person is murder, three, if the preborn is a person, then the conclusion inevitably follows that the person who knowingly kills a preborn person should be punished. Now, the point in this argument isn't to make this the main talking point of the abortion issue, although I think it is a very important one. The point of bringing it up is to expose the inconsistency, because the premise, or rather the conclusion, that a person who knowingly kills a preborn person should be punished is by and large rejected by the pro-life movement. When Donald Trump ran in the primaries, he was radically opposed by the pro-life movement, by the Right to Life, by his opponents, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, when he just merely suggested that a woman who procures an abortion should be punished. And the contradiction, the narrative of the supposedly pro-life movement was that this is not what we are about. That exposes some grievous blindness. Because the only way you can maintain that a person who murders a preborn child shouldn't be punished is if you reject one of the three premises I outlined. So what was the first one? The first one is murderers should be punished. I do not know a single Christian Republican that disagrees with that premise, that murderers should be punished. Hey, if we deny that premise, then you might as well throw out theft, you might as well throw out burglary, larceny, any other offense in law might as well be thrown out, because if you can kill a person, their right to life, if the right to life is not basic, everything else stems from that premise. So there is no one I know, and really even on the left, that denies a murderer should be punished. So the question then is, well, if that one's not rejected, then it must be a different premise that was rejected. So what's the other premise? Okay, the second premise is knowingly killing a person is murder. And this is basically a premise of definition. The idea is just defining what murder is. And I don't think anyone really disputes that. That you could have involuntary manslaughter, which is unintentional killing, but intentionally killing someone or knowingly killing a person constitutes murder. This could be either by hired assassin, this could be either by running someone over with a car, throwing some blunt object at someone, knowing it kill them. We have all these different subcategories. The idea is if you knowingly do that, it is considered murder. All right, so what's the third premise? If these two are accepted as premises that the pro-life movement and Christians within this movement believe, the only other premise that can be denied is the third one, which is the preborn is a person. All right. So if this is the premise that is not being followed, and I would argue that it is, then that is the reason why the conclusion is rejected. We are so outraged at the suggestion that someone who murders the preborn should be punished because we don't really in our hearts believe that. If we did believe it, it would be logical, natural, of course, common sense that a person who procures an abortion should be punished. That's what we're trying to move in the direction of legislation, I would hope. But then if that premise is considered to be, by and large, on its face rejected by the pro-life movement, then they are not standing on the truth of what we believe. There is no other alternative in this argument. It is a 3-point argument. If you accept the premises of those 3 points, the conclusion logically follows. If the conclusion is rejected, then one of the 3 premises have been rejected. The importance of maintaining this, of maintaining the rhetoric that we espouse, which is that we're pro-life, we want to protect the preborn, we want to protect the woman. The only way we can maintain that rhetoric is by maintaining the point that abortion is murder. Let me start to develop this a little bit. If abortion is murder, then women who procure abortions are murderers. That is as simple as 2 + 2 = 4. There is no other alternative. Obviously, there are some outliers there. You could say the premise was if a person knowingly kills a person is murder. We can even, for the sake of argument, say there are some women who are ignorant and they do not know what's going on. They do not know that abortion is murder. They don't know that abortion is killing a person. All right, we would still, even then, the argument, you could even make an argument for involuntary manslaughter. Still, the same point is that we are maintaining that this unborn child is a person. If we do not do that, if we do not maintain the heinous nature of abortion, the moral conviction by which we can speak on other matters falls apart if we cannot maintain that. Not only that, the law, the importance of the law reflecting reality, in our rhetoric reflecting reality, is in part of the solution to helping women. Women who are eaten up with guilt and remorse, who are trying to figure out in their minds healing over what just took place post-abortion, can only be done with the acknowledgement that what they did was a heinous act of murder. It's the only way. The law leads us to Christ. Christ did not come for the person who's not sick, for the righteous. He came for the sinners, for the sick, for the infirmed. Only by acknowledging the sickness will the cure of the gospel be in full effect. So I'm not pushing that the pro-life movement should just be shouting without any other context, abortion is murder, abortion is murder. Now, there's definitely a place for that. The point is, if we want to be a holistic movement, the only way we can offer the solution is by acknowledging the problem. If Jesus Christ came to save sinners, then we need to call out abortion for what it is. If Paul the Apostle is the chief of sinners, and by God saving Paul the Apostle from his wicked ways, we can understand that God offers grace and salvation to every sinner, no matter your heinous and no matter your wretchedness. Then the light and the brilliance of the grace of Christ is in full effect. But by mitigating what's going on, we are not helping women. We're not. We're only giving them excuses for their own actions. So let's get to where this damages us on the political front. If we compromise in our rhetoric, if we fail to acknowledge the full personhood of the preborn, then our legislators will not be held accountable for their compromise, for their silence, for their capitulation to the left. We basically surrender the ground at the outset. If we start arguing with abortion on the grounds of health care alone, we've lost already. We've lost the battle. We've conceded everything if we started there. Only by acknowledging that abortion is murder can even the health care point become an actual issue. Because the psychological damage of a woman recognizing that, and she knows it in her own heart, that she's just killed someone, the grace of Christ heal that brokenness in their mind comes in full effect. The grace of Christ cleanse us from all of our sin. So the first point is, only by acknowledging that abortion is murder can we press upon our legislators the gravity of where they sit, that they must always push the antithesis that abortion is murder, and that they ought to act and speak and rally others of their fellow legislators, fellow Republicans, to frame it in that light. By acknowledging that abortion is murder, and by consistently speaking that way, we will also rattle our own apathy. Because let's just be honest, the numbers of abortion that happen per day in America, which is upwards of 3,000 per day, that statistic, to really grapple with that, we have to almost build barriers in our own minds because it's so heinous, because it's so grievous, it's so horrific that almost just to cope with life, we have to set up barriers. We almost have to try to block it out of our minds. But by pushing the antithesis, we will instill in our own brethren, in our own people, in our own areas, or whether it's our committees, whether it's our clubs, whether it's our legislators, whether it's the President of the United States, by acknowledging that all people, born and unborn, are created in the image of God and are deserving of our protection as a nation. Only by asserting that will it rattle our apathy. Because we all have probably known people who have had abortions. We all know people, have heard of people who've had abortions. It's becoming so prevalent in our culture that its diabolical nature is becoming normal to us. It's passé. What can we do about it? I mean, not only that, are you suggesting I call out somebody, one of my friends, for what she did? I'm not telling you that the way you go about this is to say, oh, you murderer, you should be punished. That's not the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is to restrain evil. So from a legislative perspective, we want to prevent evil from happening. But from a gospel perspective, only by acknowledging it can we offer the grace of Christ. The analogy, a often used one, is imagine you're a doctor and your patient has cancer. What are you going to tell your patient? Are you going to tell your patient that they're fine? That they're not dying, they're not terminally ill, that if they don't act, they're going to die? Or do you tell them the truth, as hard as it is, that you have cancer killing you, and unless you act, it will destroy you? Now, to connect the analogy, abortion will destroy not just individuals who have them, but our nation. If we, as our conscience and as the soul of our nation becomes comfortable with child murder, what other sins and iniquities and abominations will we tolerate in the future? If we're willing to have that a threshold that we will tolerate, what threshold is too high for us? None of them. None of them. So only by pushing the antithesis, by urging our leaders to speak in this way about abortion, do we even have a hope of regaining the conscience of our culture, of our people, and of our nation. That's all I have on it now. Thank you for listening. Leave a like and share if you appreciated the content and if you think that it's a message that needs to be delivered to our people of our nation. I would appreciate that. Stay tuned for the next episode.